Hi everybody, you're listening to Comics and History, episode number 116, part 5, Spotlight on Green Lantern Alan Scott in the Pre-Flashpoint era, continued. And welcome to the show. I am your host, Brian J. Rygate, and class is back from recess as we continue our gargantuan overview of the career of Green Lantern Alan Scott during the period 1999 through 2011. I figure it'll take part 5 plus a very short sixth part to finish off this look at Alan Scott's career for the pre-Flashpoint era. Again, it's one of my favorite periods in Alan Scott's publishing history. He was such a prolific character during this time without having a solo title of his own. And I remember when I started recording episode 116, I'm thinking, we'll probably get done in about 3, maybe 4 parts at most. And here we are. But before I get back into looking at Alan Scott during this time period, I want to begin with a nice bit of feedback from a fellow named John. And John, if I mispronounce your last name, please accept my most humble apologies. I see it as Reskusic. Hopefully I pronounced that or enunciated that correctly. And John writes, I love your podcast. I'm working my way through it slowly. I'm in the middle of your Guy Gardner run. Like you, I love Guy Gardner. I'm finding my ride to work and my ride home to be very enjoyable listening to your podcast. Just wanted to touch bases and give you an attaboy. Keep up the good work. John, thank you so much for emailing me at comicsandhistory@gmail.com. It really thrills me when I get emails like John's. And really neat to hear from a listener who's going right back to the beginning of the show or near the beginning. For those of you who are new to the show, and welcome to you, you'll find that on my page over at Spreaker.com, there's episode 0, but then all of my 0-hour episodes have been taken down, and that's simply because of storage space on Spreaker. I only get 100 hours worth of storage space, and so some time ago I actually cracked the 100-hour marker, and given the prices for the different plans, it wasn't economically feasible for me to bump up my subscription to the next pay level. So I am slowly having to remove all of my older episodes. And so sadly, that means that my Guy Gardner Spotlight series will be coming down in the near future. And that's a real point of pride for me because, one, after Alan Scott, I'd say Guy Gardner is my favorite Green Lantern. Well, I could certainly say he's my favorite member of the Green Lantern Corps. I'm so proud of what I did with that Spotlight series because my review of 0 Hour, that was my opening trial where I was just getting accustomed to the idea of recording and putting my voice out there. And I made mistakes here and there. I remember my review of the Superboy 0 Hour tie-in, and I mixed it up with some content from an Infinite Crisis comic, and I'm certainly not perfect by any stretch these days as a podcaster, but I'd like to think that I've come along in terms of getting away from just describing what I've read and getting more into the analytical. And I feel like I started doing that with Guy Gardner. Plus, when I looked at Guy Gardner in the Silver and the Bronze Ages, my wife was at work. I didn't have a little one at home at the time, and so I was able to go out and acquire just about every Guy Gardner appearance from the Silver through the end of the Bronze Age. I think today there's only 2 Bronze Age era Guy Gardner related comics I don't have in my collection. But I was really happy that I was able to get through that spotlight in such a way that I covered pretty well everything from his career through the New 52. I managed to get through his entire time as a Red Lantern. And by contrast, I mean, now that my wife is at home, I have a little girl who is my number one priority in my life. I can't quite do as extensive issue by issue spotlight reviews like I did for Guy Gardner, but it was nice that I managed to do that for Gardner, who tends to be one of the, not so much the overlooked lanterns, but somebody who's very often dismissed as the lovable jerk, and there's so much more to him than that. So John, thank you for writing in and sharing with me that you really enjoy Guy Gardner. I do as well. I'm thinking when Victoria's older, I'll be playing big time catch up and reading all of the comics that Guy's been appearing in the last few years, because from what I've seen from solicitations, it looks like Guy is in a really good space, and he's really fun to read going forward in this rebirth era. But now let's turn our focus back to our continuing look at Alan Scott, the first person to take the name Green Lantern in the DC Comics universe, in the real world, publishing-wise, anyways, because of course there have been so many different retcons in the past explaining that there were people prior to Alan who wore a ring. But that's not the reason why you're here. You're here to hear more about Alan and what was going on in his career. Last time I ended off by looking at the start of the second volume of Justice Society of America, and so that's what I'm going to pick up here. Now, Jeff Johns' return to the Justice Society of America title was probably the worst kept secret in DC Comics at the time. He wasn't yet the chief creative officer at DC, but certainly he had come to be seen as the continuity master, and so his responsibilities were slowly piling up at DC. So the fact that he was off for the last few issues of Justice Society of, or JSA Volume 1 just reflected the fact that he needed time to make sure that going forward past Infinite Crisis and 52, there was a tight continuity that was being put into place within the DC universe and that everything connected. And then once Volume 2 started up, everybody knew that Mr. Johns would be back. But this time, there would be no 70-plus issue run for Mr. Johns on Justice Society of America. I want to say that he spent somewhere in the vicinity of 26 issues on Justice Society of America Volume 2. And what I really want to focus on was perhaps the finest story arc from the second volume, and that is Thy Kingdom Come. For those of you who don't know, Kingdom Come was a magnificent Elseworlds story from around 1995, I want to say, written by Mark Waid, painted by Alex Ross. Took place on an Earth that was very similar to the post-crisis or pre-Flashpoint era Earth. And it was a look at how things had changed in the last 15 to 20 years. Basically, the trinity of Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman all went their separate ways. Superman went into a self-imposed exile following the death of his wife, Lois Lane, and his refusal to kill his wife's murderer, the Joker. He subsequently fell out of favor with the public when a new quote-unquote hero called Magog came along and killed the Joker. Bruce Wayne had his secret identity as Batman outed to the public, being a Two-Face, broke his back again, leaving him to become basically a shut-in in the Batcave and deploy a group of large bat robots to keep the peace. Wonder Woman had returned to Themyscira, but she had had her royal title removed. And basically, what happened in the future was the next generation of heroes didn't really have anybody to look up to. And so this world was in some chaos. Superman would come back to try to be that inspirational figure, but he wasn't quite the same Superman as he was before. He certainly ran afoul of Bruce Wayne, and in the end, both Superman and Batman squared off against each other with armies of their own, to the point that nuclear missiles were actually deployed and sent onto the field of battle, and it was Captain Marvel who sacrificed his life to prevent the missiles from killing everybody. But what happened was, unleashing his power, there was a nuclear fallout, and the third issue ended with everyone seemingly dead. And so, for years after, DC editorial was looking for ways to incorporate aspects of Kingdom Come into the quote-unquote mainstream DC universe. And this would continue past Thy Kingdom Come. But Thy Kingdom Come was a very conscious effort to help tie in the mythology behind this fascinating alternate Earth with New Earth, as it was called, following Infinite Crisis. So, in Thy Kingdom Come, the Superman from the Kingdom Come Earth, which had been designated Earth 22 in the final pages of 52, appeared on New Earth, and he first sought out the assistance of the Justice Society of America. And so everybody on the JSA was surprised to see this older looking Superman whose costume incorporated black elements, replacing the brighter yellow in the traditional Superman costume. And this older Superman explained to Justice Society of America that where he was from, they were dead. Everybody was dead. And the JSA did a smart thing. They called in our Superman, who listened to the Kingdom Come Superman tell his tale of woe, and at the end, our Superman said, yes, he is telling the truth. And so part of this was not so much an acquiescence to fans who are angry that the Earth 2 Superman had been killed off in Infinite Crisis, but it was a nice bone being thrown to the fans who remembered the All-Star Comics revival, which featured the Earth 2 Superman coming out of retirement for a time and fighting alongside the Justice Society of America. Certainly, it was something very sweet for Power Girl, who had lost her cousin in Infinite Crisis. And the designation of